Hey everyone, let's talk a little bit about eligibility. And I'm hoping this video will kind of help out with your week 2 exercise, which is determining eligibility. When we find potential grant opportunities, from whether it be from a federal agency, whether it be a state agency or a private foundation, we kind of went over that last week. Um, the first thing we need to determine is if we're eligible to get that grant. The very first thing you look for in the information about the grant, which a lot of times is contained within a request for proposal, like they'll put together a document or have it on their website as to what they're looking for, types of projects they're looking for, lots of information about what they fund, what they do not fund, those types of things. So the first thing you look at always, it's the first thing I tell everyone that wants to learn about grants, is you have to determine if your agency is eligible for that grant. So within that information, there's usually an eligibility section that outlines the type of agency that they fund. Now, as I mentioned, in the instructions for the discussion last week, typically funders don't fund anything other than a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Now, that's an IRS designation. That means that you are a nonprofit. There are grants out there for entities like state agencies. They're fewer. In our case at Concord, we are an institution of higher education. There's grants out there for those types of entities. You have to determine if your agency is listed in the eligibility section. If your agency is not listed, you can't apply for that. I mean, you can apply for the grant, but you're not going to get it because you're not eligible. Okay. So that's a hard and fast rule. If they say, only 501c3s, that's the only ones that can apply to that grant. Okay. So eligibility becomes the number one most important thing because that helps you eliminate a lot of opportunities right off the bat. Okay. Another thing to think about is geographic location. You see this a lot in sometimes with the federal government, but a lot with private foundations or corporations. They only fund in a certain area. In the case of corporations, a lot of times they like to fund where their corporation is in the community that their, a site is at. Say their Honda, the car company, has a corporate giving program, and they give out grants for certain things, but they want to fund in the communities where they have a Honda plant, where they put together, portions of the cars or whatnot. So they want to fund in that area. So, keep in mind the geographic location too, because if you're not located in the geographic location they say they fund, you're not eligible to get the grant again. So keep that in mind as well. When you're looking at the document, there's almost always, especially with the federal government, there's almost always a maximum award. Sometimes they have a minimum award as well. They won't take grants under maybe $20,000, but won't take, fund applications over $200,000. Sometimes they give you a range. Sometimes they don't. But if there is one in there, you do not exceed that range for your proposal. They will not fund anything above that maximum award. Okay. Then you really need to dig down into the information about types of programs that they fund, and if your program fits in with what they want to do. A lot of times they have a mission and goals behind, they're giving their grant funding programs. They want to achieve certain things. It might be toward, homelessness or hunger or health and health in the community. They might have specific goals that they're looking at, funding projects within. And the type of program they're funding. If you're looking for a grant for a specific purpose, say, and I think I mentioned this as in the exercise as an example, if you need funding for a conference for your nonprofit organization, and they specifically say they don't fund conferences, they mean it. They will not give you money. There's no wiggle room within that. So that type of program becomes very important because some, private agencies are very, notorious for this. They will give a list of things that they do not fund, and sometimes give a list of things that they will fund. So be sure when you're looking at funding opportunities, you look at all that information. Knowledge is power when it comes to grant writing. So the more you know, the better fit you can make. Typically, I tell people, and I think I've said this in other videos, but you can't chase the money. You can't retrofit your organization for the money available. You have to find a funding agency that fits along with what you're doing. So that becomes very important in determining your eligibility for the funding and if it's the right fit. So just keep those points in mind when you're looking at funding opportunities and determining if they're the right one for you and your organization. All right. You take care, guys.